Welcome back. We are continuing our lecture on the 3 circles, careers in forensic science. So this is part 2. Here's our 3 circles again. Last time we talked about Office of the Medical Investigator, or OMI. Today we're going to focus on criminalists and legal. And something I forgot to point out in the last video, notice how all these circles overlap with each other. They all work together. Some of these jobs you'll kind of find going back and forth between 2 categories. A lot of it varies on the state or county. But the main thing to get from this image is they all work together. So the crime lab. First job on that is crime scene investigator. They document the crime scene by sketching, photographing, and video. They're the ones who actually collect and pick up the evidence, store it, transport it. And in doing so, they maintain the integrity of the scene, which means it's not going to be contaminated, assuming everyone's doing their job right. Botanist. They study plants. You may think those are like flower people. What do they have to do with forensics? Well, plant fragments such as leaves and stems and petals, seeds, pollen, soil are all great pieces of evidence. You can place a victim or a suspect at a crime scene. You can tell if, say, a body's been moved because, oh, the soil found on the body doesn't match the soil where the body was found. Interesting, etc. Entomologist studies bugs. These are crucial in determining the location and especially the time of death, because these people can look at the life cycle of a fly or a beetle and see what larval stage it's at, if there's been eggs laid yet, etc., and you can determine a rough time of death based on how long and how many life cycles these bugs have been alive for. Fingerprint examiner. Exactly what it sounds like. They examine fingerprints as well as palm and footprints, and these are the people who match prints found at a scene to a person. Now, this can be done by running an image through a database. A lot of it is still done manually because there's only so much a computer can do, and we'll talk about that more when we get to the fingerprints unit. Firearms examiner. So they examine and identify firearms, like guns. They compare bullets and shell casings that are found at the scene, and they also look for and identify gunshot residue on a suspect. Document examiner examines documents. So this you're mainly looking to determine authenticity and ownership. So if there's been any alterations from an original document, or if a document or currency is counterfeit, that would all fall under document examiner. Trace evidence examiner examines very small pieces of evidence. That's what trace means. Like when you say, oh, there's only a trace of whatever, that's where it comes from. So hair, fiber, glass, soil, paint, anything that you need at least a magnifying glass to look at falls under the realm of the trace evidence examiner. And going into our third and final circle, legal and law enforcement, I'm going to start with police officers. They have a lot to do at a scene. They're the ones who secure the scene, and they can use barricades, they might have people standing guard, and there's always going to be a sign-in, sign-out sheet so you know who's been on the scene. And only people who absolutely need to be there can enter. They control the scene, preserve evidence that the criminalists collect, ensure the safety of victims and bystanders. There's usually a lot of people, looky-loos, wondering what's going on. Victims might still be alive. Call EMS. And they separate the witnesses to get testimonies, and that's something I want you to think about. Why are witnesses separated? And we'll answer that in a later lecture. Detectives. So detectives can oversee multiple cases, and they're the ones who kind of put all the bits and pieces together. So they talk with OMI, they talk with the crime lab, they talk with police officers, and they work to create a sequence of events and stay with the case and its developments. Lawyers and the district attorney. They use information from the case that the detectives put together to either prosecute or defend a suspect. So this is when a case ends up in court and you determine if someone is guilty or not. And there are so many other jobs that I haven't mentioned in here. Toolmark analyst, forensic nursing, forensic accounting, forensic engineering, computer and digital, blood spatter. There's just pretty much any career you can think of. You can put forensic in front of it and it probably exists. So that's something you'll do with this project coming up, is look into all these different careers. You can choose one that's been on this slideshow or one that hasn't been, because there's just so much out there. So a couple questions to review in your notes. What two roles might work together to examine a soil sample? And what two roles work together to protect evidence at a scene?